"I speak 7 languages, sir." Her words silenced the Duke. "Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey through time, where the pride of ancient titles meets the silent strength of a heart educated by adversity. This is the story of Claraara Santandere, a young woman who carried on her shoulders the weight of a stained surname, and of Don Felipe de Mendoza, a duke imprisoned in the icy towers of his own arrogance. Set in the imposing halls and melancholic gardens of a Spanish palace, this narrative invites us to witness how true love is not born of noble convenience, but flourishes in shared silences, in delicate gestures, and in the courage to challenge centuries of tradition. Before we begin, let me ask you, where are you watching us from right now? Leave your city, your country in the comments. We'd love to know that our tales cross borders and reach hearts in so many different places. And if this story touches your soul as we hope, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Every gesture helps us continue to bring narratives that warm, inspire, and transform. Now, take a deep breath, close your eyes for a moment, and let me take you to year 1849, location, Palace of Almanza, province of Castile, Spain. The wrought iron gate groaned like an ancient lament as the carriage passed through the ducal coat of arms, a rampant lion guarding a castle, symbols of power that resisted time like stone resists the wind. Claraara Santandere clutched her grandmother's worn shawl between her gloved fingers, that faded piece of wool that held the last perfume of love she had ever known. She was 26, an age that society considered late, already marked by the shadow of solitude. But her brown eyes, serene as lakes on a breezeless afternoon, carried something the years had failed to extinguish: dignity. The Palace of Almanza rose before her like a fortress of impossible dreams. 3 stories of stone gilded by the Castilian sun, 47 rooms that echoed 400 years of history. Formal gardens where French geometry attempted to domesticate the wild nature of Spain. Everything there breathed permanence, tradition, the weight of generations. And she, the daughter of a silk merchant who had drowned in gambling debts, brought only one trunk containing 3 mended dresses, a few precious books saved from the auction of shame, and a rosary whose wood held the prayers of 18 years in the convent of Santa Catalina. Amparo, the head housekeeper, received her at the servants' entrance with a look that measured and weighed. 52 years of service to the Mendoza family had taught that woman with calloused hands to read people like one reads the sky before a storm. "Señorita Santandere," she said, and there was something between compassion and warning in her voice. "Welcome to the Palace of Almanza. Your 4th predecessor lasted 3 weeks, the 5th only 8 days. I hope you understand the nature of this employment." Clara nodded in silence. She knew the story well. 5 governesses in 18 months. None had endured the temperament of the widowed duke, that man who had turned mourning into armor and loneliness into a title. Don Sebastian, the head butler, appeared in the corridor like a solemn shadow. 60 years weighed on his curved shoulders, but his eyes maintained the sharpness of one who supervised 23 servants and knew every secret that inhabited those walls. "His Excellency awaits in the main drawing room," he announced, and the words carried the weight of a sentence. The drawing room stole her breath. High ceilings adorned with Baroque frescoes, crystal chandeliers that captured the afternoon light like prisons of fire, jacaranda furniture carved by anonymous masters. And in the center of it all, above the marble fireplace, the portrait of a woman of ethereal beauty, blue eyes like the August sky, cascading black hair, a smile that seemed to guard secrets of tenderness. The late Duchess Leonor de Aguirre Sandoval, dead 4 years, a ghostly presence that still inhabited every shadow of that palace. And before the portrait, with his back to her, a male figure contemplated his dead wife with a posture that blended rigidity and defeat. "Señorita Santandere," the voice was grave, educated, cold as tombstone marble. Don Felipe Enrique de Mendoza y Castilla, who fought the Duke of Almanza, turned slowly. He was a man of 35, but mourning had trapped his youth like amber traps an insect. Black hair already invaded by grey, although his age did not justify it. Dark, deep-set eyes, where something had been buried alive. An imposing presence that needed no crown to make the weight of noble generations felt. On his right ring finger, the ducal signet ring, a lion and castle engraved in gold and onyx. "A Santander," he said, and the surname sounded like an accusation. "Your father owed money to half of Burgos's trade, And now his daughter intends to educate the future Duke of Almaza? The blow was precise, calculated to humiliate. Clara felt the blush rise up her neck, but she kept her chin up. 18 years of convent silence had taught her that there is a dignity that no debt can stain. My father made mistakes, Your Excellency. I am not my mistakes, nor his. I am what I have learned, what I read, what I teach. Pretensions. Felipe walked in a circle around her, like a general inspecting a soldier. The agency said you speak 6 languages, a convenient lie to impress needy dukes. I speak 6 languages, sir, and I did not lie about any of them. Then you are foolish for being honest. In this house, Señorita Santander, remember your place. You govern children. You do not opine on the duchy. You teach basic French and mathematics. You do not develop pretensions above your station. Is that clear? Clara took a deep breath. In the convent, the Mother Superior used to say that humiliation is a test. It either destroys or it forges. Perfectly clear, Your Excellency. Good. Don Sebastian will take you to your quarters. You will meet the children tomorrow at dawn. Good night. She was dismissed like a servant. She turned to leave, but something made her stop, perhaps the stubbornness that no convent had managed to domesticate. Your Excellency? Yes. The voice was ice. I thank you for the opportunity, and I promise that your children will learn not only languages, but something more precious, that knowledge is the only title no one can take from us. Felipe stared at her with an indecipherable expression. For a second, a very brief one, something seemed to crack in that marble armor, but it was only a second. We shall see, Señorita Santander. We shall see. That night, in the small room near the stables where the governesses slept, Clara unpacked her scarce belongings. Her grandmother's rosary was placed on the nightstand, the books piled up with reverence, Cervantes, Dante, Shakespeare, Goethe, worn volumes whose margins carried notes in 7 different languages, silent evidence of nights spent studying by candlelight, of a poor girl who had decided that poverty would not define her mind. She knelt by the narrow bed and prayed. She did not ask for success or acceptance. She asked only for the strength to always remember who she was. Outside, in the darkness of the gardens, a nightingale sang, and in that song there was so much loneliness that it seemed like a lament. Dawn arrived with a creeping mist over the gardens, transforming the palace into a mirage suspended between dream and vigil. Clara woke before the bell, put on the simplest of her 3 dresses, a grey one that carried invisible patches sewn by candlelight on nights of forced economy, and pinned her hair in a severe bun. She had learned in the convent that a modest appearance is armor against envy, that humility in dressing can disarm criticism before it is voiced. She walked through still silent corridors, where portraits of dead duchesses seemed to judge her with eyes of ink. Her steps on the marble echoed like accusations, impostor, plebeian, daughter of a bankrupt. But she kept her chin up. If those blue-blooded women scorned her, they would at least find her with her head held high. The children awaited in the 2nd-floor schoolroom, a large room with high windows overlooking the abandoned orchard. The smell of chalk and old paper mixed with the aroma of polished wood. 3 small figures, as immobile as portraits in a gallery, dressed in the perpetual black of mourning that stretched beyond the reasonable, beyond the healthy. Tomas, the heir, was 13, and his shoulders were already curved by the invisible weight of primogeniture. Eyes identical to his father's, dark as moonless nights, guarded like secret vaults, carrying responsibilities that no boy should know. He sat erect, hands resting on the antique oak table with fingers intertwined like an adult, the posture of a miniature prince already rehearsing for a throne that would one day be his. There was a rigidity in him, of one who learned too early that showing emotion is weakness. Diego, 10, concealed something beneath his desk. Ink-stained fingers betrayed a secret, not pen ink, but watercolor, of a hidden drawing, of forbidden art. There was a contained restlessness in him, like a bird in a gilded cage that still remembers the sky, still dreams of flight even though it knows its wings are tied. He shifted in his chair, eyes constantly darting away whenever Clara looked his way, guilt for doing something his father would disapprove of. And Isabel, 7 years old, black hair like her dead mother's, braided into perfect plaits that some maid must redo 3 times a day, blue eyes like the August sky that seemed to have seen too much. They had seen a mother waste away. They had seen a father transform into a marble statue. She did not look at Clara. She did not look at anything. She merely fixated on her own pale hands intertwined in her lap, fingers thin as winter branches, skin almost translucent, like a child who spends too much time in closed rooms. "Good morning," Clara spoke softly, as one who does not want to frighten a deer in the woods. "My name is Claraara Santandere. I will be your new governess." Silence. Neither hostility nor curiosity. Just that terrible absence that is worse than rejection, that indifference of those who have seen too many governesses come and go, of those who have learned not to attach, because attachment only brings pain when the inevitable departure occurs. The last one said that too. Tomas broke the silence with a voice that tried to be adult, imitating his father's tone. She lasted 3 weeks. Before her, the other lasted 8 days. "How long will you last, señorita?" "I do not know," Clara replied with an honesty that seemed to surprise him. She pulled up a chair and sat, not as a teacher before students in a position of authority, but as an equal around that table. The gesture broke the protocol, and Tomas arched an eyebrow, an identical reflection of his father's, that Mendoza gesture that questioned without words. "But while I am here, I would like to get to know each of you, not as the heir to the duchy, not as the second son, not as the little princess, as Tomas, Diego, and Isabel, just that, just you." Diego finally raised his eyes. There was surprise there, and something more, contained hope, fragile, ready to retreat at the slightest sign of disappointment. "Father Ignacio says I must be perfect," Tomas continued, and now there was a crack in the adult voice he tried to maintain. "I will be the V-Duke. I will govern these lands, represent our lineage. I cannot fail. To fail would be to dishonor 400 years of Mendoza's." "And who said that to be human is to fail?" Clara asked gently. "My father." The words came out like a death sentence. The syllables hung in the air of the schoolroom like a verdict. Clara understood then, with painful clarity, those children were not being educated. They were being sculpted into statues, molded into marble replicas of a man who had forgotten how to be human, who had mistaken title for identity. She stood and walked to the window. Her soft steps on the wooden floor seemed excessively loud in the heavy silence. Outside, the abandoned orchard stretched twisted branches against the grey morning sky, trees that no one had pruned in years since the Duchess had died. Wild apple trees laden with small, imperfect, too sour fruit for a palace pie, but alive, stubbornly, obstinately alive. "Look at those trees," she said, pointing. "No one has cared for them for years. They grow crooked, without symmetry, without the shape a gardener would impose. The fruit is no good for the ducal table, but they continue to live. They continue to bear fruit, even if imperfect. Imperfect, but alive." "What does that have to do with Latin?" Tomas challenged, confused. "Nothing and everything." Clara turned to face them. "We will not have a Latin lesson today. Today we will not speak of declinations or of conjugations of dead verbs. Today we will talk about what you like, about what you dream of when no one is ordering perfection." For the first time in months, Diego spoke, his voice hesitant. Can I show you my drawings?" And something in that timid request broke the ice. Clara nodded, and Diego pulled out from under the desk not 1 notebook but 3, a pile of papers tied with string, hidden, guarded like a treasure. They were drawings of imaginary cathedrals, impossible castles, bridges that defied gravity. He had a raw, instinctive talent that no master had yet refined but which already showed genius. They are very bad," Diego said, preparing for rejection. "They are extraordinary," Clara replied, and saw the boy's eyes fill with unshed tears. "You have a gift. Do not waste this gift by hiding it." Tomas watched, but there was something more than distrust in his expression. There was yearning. "And you?" Clara turned to him. "What do you dream of when you do not need to be perfect?" The boy hesitated. Then, so low that Clara almost didn't hear, "I dream of just being Tomas, not the future V-Duke. Just a boy who can make a mistake without dishonoring generations." And Isabel, whom no one expected to speak, whispered a single, broken word. "Mama." Clara felt her own tears forming. She approached the girl, knelt to be at the level of the blue eyes that did not blink. "You can talk about her," she said softly. "You can cry for her. Mourning is not weakness. It is love that has nowhere else to go." And for the first time in 4 years, Isabel cried. She cried in the arms of a stranger who, at that moment, became less strange. Clara hugged her, rocking her gently, while Tomas and Diego watched as if witnessing a miracle. There was no lesson that day. There was only conversation. Diego showed all his drawings, years of hidden work. Tomas admitted he was terrified of disappointing his father, a terror that kept him from sleeping. Isabel asked to hear stories about the mother she was forgetting more and more. At the end of the afternoon, when the bell rang, the three children did not want to leave. It was the first time that the schoolroom felt less like a prison and more like a refuge. That night, when Clara finally retired to the small room near the stables, exhausted but strangely hopeful, Don Sebastian appeared at her door. He knocked gently, waited to be invited in. "Señorita Santander, I am obliged to inform you. His Excellency observed the lessons today." Her heart froze. She had broken protocol, ignored the curriculum, allowed the children to cry. "And," she managed to ask. He said nothing. He only observed. The butler hesitated, and there was unsaid emotion on that usually impassive face. "In 4 years, Señorita, it is the first time I have seen him enter the children's wing. 4 years since she died, and today he came in. He stood in the corridor, the door ajar, watching. He did not intervene. He did not order. He did not criticize. He only observed. Was he angry? I cannot say what he was, Señorita, but when he left I saw something in his face that I have not seen since before the Duchess died." Don Sebastian paused. It looked like hope. After he left, Clara lay awake in the darkness, listening to the palace breathe, sounds she was learning to recognize, the creak of old wood, the wind in the corridors, distant chapel bells. And she realized something frightening. That entire house lived suspended, waiting for someone to break the spell. Servants, children, even the Duke himself, all trapped in a mourning that had become a mode of existence. She did not know if she would have the courage to break such an old, so deeply rooted spell. But maybe she did not need courage. Maybe she just needed stubbornness. And stubbornness, she had plenty of that. December arrived with rains that transformed the gardens into faded watercolors. Clara had been in the palace for a month, and the children's transformation was subtle, but as real as a change of season. Tomás smiled, not always, but sometimes, when Diego told jokes about clumsy knights. Diego drew openly, and his sketches of imaginary cathedrals showed a talent that even his own father did not yet recognize. Isabel whispered a word. "Mama." Just that, one night when Clara was rocking her after a nightmare. But it was a beginning, Felipe observed. Clara felt the weight of that ducal gaze whenever she walked through the corridors, whenever she taught in the schoolroom with the door ajar. He did not interfere, he did not praise. He merely observed, like a scholar observes an experiment whose result he cannot yet predict. It was Don Sebastian who brought the news that would change everything. "Señorita Santander." He appeared at the schoolroom door one Friday afternoon, his expression grave. "His Excellency requests your presence in the ducal office." Immediately. The office was a masculine sanctuary of power, walls lined with dark oak, portraits of 10 generations of dukes gazing at the present with critical eyes, an antique globe where Spain still dominated half the world. Felipe stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, a military posture. "Señorita Santander," he said without turning, "in 2 weeks we will receive important guests. It will be a diplomatic dinner. Castilian nobles, the French ambassador, representatives of the court. Matters of politics and alliance." Clara waited, not understanding why they were informing her. "The children will remain in their rooms. They are not ready for society." Now he turned. "You, however, will join us at the table." "Me?" Clara could not disguise her astonishment. "But I am a governess, Your Excellency. It is not appropriate. I decide what is appropriate in my house." The voice was steel. "I want them to see the type of servant I employ. I want them to know that even governesses here meet unattainable standards." Understanding chilled her insides. He was not inviting her. He was exhibiting her, like a trophy or a warning. "As you wish, Your Excellency. Dress appropriately. Amparo has a dress that will fit. It does not need to be elegant, just presentable." Humiliation was now so familiar that Clara barely felt it anymore. She merely bowed her head slightly and withdrew. Ambassador Philippe Renard, a middle-aged man with impeccable mustaches, was discussing the terms of a trade treaty with Felipe in French. Clara, seated 8 places down, observed the tension in the Duke's shoulders. He did not understand. He tried to disguise it with diplomatic monosyllables, but he was lost in technical jargon that mixed commerce and politics. Renard noticed. His tone became slightly impatient. "Alors, Monsieur le Duc, concernant les tarifs préférentiels pour les textiles catalans." "So, Mr. Duke, concerning the preferential tariffs for Catalan textiles," Felipe improvised a response. He made a mistake. Clara saw the sudden discomfort on the ambassador's face. A misunderstanding that could cause a diplomatic incident. She did not think. She just spoke in fluent French. Pardonnez-moi, monsieur l'ambassadeur. Je crois que sa grâce souhaite clarifier. Pardon me, Mr. Ambassador. I believe his grace wishes to clarify. Silence fell like a blade. All eyes turned to her. Felipe turned pale, then red. Clara corrected the misunderstanding with 3 precise sentences. Renard relaxed, smiled. The Marquise de Salazar arched a surprised eyebrow. The Dowager Duchess of Osuna, a 68-year-old matriarch whose power in the court rivaled Queen's, leaned forward, interested. Felipe controlled himself, barely. Madame Renard, the ambassador's wife, tried to recover civility. Quelle surprise! Une gouvernante qui parle français. What a surprise. A governess who speaks French. Then, whimsically, testing, she quoted Dante, in Italian. Clara replied with Petrarch, also in Italian. The dinner became an involuntary linguistic spectacle. Clara answered a question in English, a comment in German. The nobles watched, incredulous. Felipe gripped his wineglass hard enough to crush it. When the dinner ended and the guests moved to the drawing room, Felipe called Clara over. His voice was low, lethal. Is Señorita Santander collecting languages to compensate for a lack of lineage? Clara felt years of humiliations, of being belittled for her surname, for her poverty, for her audacity in having an education. It all surged up like a wave. She stood up. She faced him. I speak 7 languages, Your Excellency. Her voice sounded crystal clear in the suddenly silent room. French, Italian, English, German, Portuguese, Latin and Spanish. I learned them not to impress dukes, but because wise nuns loved me more than my own blood, because books were my family when no one else wanted to be, and because knowledge, Your Excellency, is the only title no duke can take from me. She turned and left. Behind her, the Duchess of Osuna murmured, loud enough for everyone to hear, astonishing. Not even my granddaughter, educated in Paris, masters so many. And then, staring at Felipe, be careful, young duke. Dismiss this girl and you will be remembered as a fool. But Clara did not hear. She was already climbing the stairs, trembling, knowing that she had just signed her expulsion. Clara did not sleep. She packed her trunk methodically, folded the 3 dresses, wrapped the books in paper. By dawn she would be ready. She would not wait to be expelled. She would leave with dignity. But dawn came, and Don Sebastian did not knock at the door with an order to depart. At 8 o'clock, Amparo appeared, not with a dismissal, but with a coffee tray. The wrinkled face showed perplexity. His Excellency wants to see you, in the Winter Garden after breakfast. The Winter Garden was a glass greenhouse at the back of the palace, created by the late Duchess to cultivate roses that could not withstand the Castilian winter. No one had entered there since her death. Felipe had kept it closed, an untouched sanctuary of memory. Clara found him among the wild rose bushes, without a coat, only a shirt and waistcoat, his hair disheveled as if he had not slept. He held a wilting red rose, petals falling like dry tears. Señorita Santander, he said without turning. Clara, may I call you Clara? It was the first time he had used her first name. The sudden intimacy was more frightening than the previous formality. As you wish, Your Excellency. Please, in this place, among dead roses, dispense with the title. He turned around. His eyes were red. My wife cultivated these flowers. She said that fragile things deserve extra care. I did not listen. I was always busy with ducal affairs. And then she died, and I realized too late that I had confused priorities. Clara remained still. Felipe continued, his voice breaking. When Leonor fell ill, I could have called the best doctors from Madrid, from the royal palace itself. But my pride, my cursed Mendoza pride, said that a duke does not ask for help, that it would show weakness. I called the local doctor, and he did not know what to do, and she died, and I killed her with my pride. Tears. Clara saw them run down his aristocratic face and understood. That man was not a monster. He was just a broken man, hiding behind a title because it was the only armor left. Your Excellency. Last night, he cut in, you humiliated me, in front of ambassadors, in front of the Duchess of Osuna, whose opinion can destroy careers. And you know what I realized? You did not humiliate me. I humiliated myself, for being small, for being cruel, for using a title as a whip against someone who deserved respect. He walked up to Clara. He stopped 2 steps away. The proximity was unsettling, laden with something neither dared to name. Forgive me, he said simply. not as duke, as a man. Forgive me for being small when you were always great. Clara felt her own tears forming. And the children? She whispered. Forgive them too, for being human when you demand they be perfect. Felipe closed his eyes. How do I do that? How do I forgive them when I do not even know how to be a father? It starts by showing up. Clara dared to touch his hand. Just show up. Have dinner with them. Listen to Diego's drawings. Read stories to Isabel before bed. Talk to Tomas about his fears. That is all. Show up. What if I fail? Then you will fail, surrounded by love, which is better than triumphing surrounded by emptiness. Felipe held her hand. The touch was electric, forbidden, impossible. Duke and governess. Worlds separated by chasms of class, tradition, a whole century of rules. But there, among dead roses and foggy glass, they were just a man and a woman, both alone, both broken, both trying to learn how to be human. Stay, he asked. Not as a governess, as... He hesitated. As family. Be family to us. Please. Clara nodded, unable to speak. When she left the winter garden, the sun had broken through the clouds, and for the first time in 4 years, the palace of Almarza felt less like a tomb and more like a home. December brought snow, large, slow flakes, turning Almarza into a Gothic fairy tale. The children ran out into the gardens for the first time in recent memory. Felipe allowed it. More than that, he joined them. Clara watched from the window as the Duke of Almarza, a man whose word moved regional politics, built a clumsy snowman that made Diego laugh until his stomach hurt. That night, something changed. Felipe ordered dinner to be served not in the grand banquet hall, a mahogany table for 24 where 3 generations of dukes had received kings, but in the family room, a small round table where Leonor used to gather the family. Tomas arrived first, suspicious. Are you here because Father Ignacio ordered it? Felipe removed the ducal ring. He placed it on the table. The gesture was symbolic, a temporary abandonment of title. I am here because I want to be, and tonight, I am not the Duke. I am just your father. Isabel, hesitant, approached. A small hand touched his bearded face. Felipe closed his eyes, and Clara saw centuries of Mendoza pride melting like snow in the sun. Papa, Isabel whispered. A word she had not said for 4 years. Are you back? Yes, my little one, I am back. After the children were asleep, Felipe sought Clara in the library. She was cataloguing new books he had ordered, an impressive investment in education that had surprised the entire region. Clara, he said, and the name sounded too intimate in that immense room lined with knowledge. I need to ask you something. What? Teach me to read. Not as my tutor taught me with a switch and humiliation, but as you teach my children, with patience. Clara turned, surprised. You know how to read. I do, but... He hesitated, utterly vulnerable. I have difficulty. The letters dance. I always have. My father said it was stupidity, a lack of effort. I have never read a whole book in my life, and I want to. I want to read to Isabel. I want to understand these French texts you discuss with Tomas. I want not to be an ignorant man disguised as a nobleman. Clara understood. Dyslexia, undiagnosed, turned into a secret shame that he carried as all Mendozas carried their burdens, in silence, with wounded pride. It is not stupidity, she said softly. Your mind works differently. I can teach you a method that will help. Thus began a ritual. Every night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Felipe met in the library. She chose colors, red for verbs, blue for nouns. She developed a visual system that circumvented his difficulty, and slowly, painfully, Felipe began to read. The first book he finished was Don Quixote. When he reached the last page, on a January night, where the fire in the fireplace transformed the library into a golden cocoon, Felipe closed the volume with reverence. He fought windmills, he said, like me, and he was called mad, as they probably call me. The difference, Clara replied, is that you stopped fighting windmills. You started fighting for something real. Felipe raised his eyes. The distance between them leaning over the reading table was a matter of inches, but it seemed impassable as an ocean. I am in love with you, he said, and this is impossible. Clara could not breathe. Why? She whispered. Because I am a duke, and you are unworthy. Everything I should have always been. He held her hand. You are worthy of everything, of title, of honors, of love, and I am just a man who woke up too late to who he should have been. Felipe. Hearing her own name sound on those lips was too much. He kissed her. It was not the kiss of a duke and a governess. It was the kiss of a man and a woman who had found in the wreckage of their broken lives the possibility of reconstruction. When they parted, both were trembling. "This cannot happen," Clara said. "I know. The court will never accept it. I know. I will be socially destroyed. That is why I cannot ask you." Felipe pulled away, his hands shaking. "I cannot ask you to marry me. It would be to condemn you." "Then do not ask." Clara stood up. "Let me decide." And she left, leaving him alone among thousands of books that he finally knew how to read, but which held no answer to the dilemma that tore at his heart. January turned into a fever of snow and heavy silences. Felipe and Clara moved through the palace like satellites, orbiting without touching, trapped in an impossible gravity. The children noticed. Tomás observed with the gaze of one who is deciphering an enigma. Diego drew portraits of the two without understanding why. Isabel held Clara's hand with the desperation of one who fears losing a mother again. It was Father Ignacio who forced the issue. A man of 70, he had baptized 3 generations of Mendozas and feared no duke. He summoned Felipe to the confessional, not to confess sins but to hear truths. "Your Excellency, I watched your grandfather destroy lives with pride," the priest said. "I watched your father die bitter for never having loved. Do not make the same mistake." "She is not noble," Felipe argued. "She is the daughter of a bankrupt merchant. If I marry her, you will be happy," Father Ignacio cut in. "And frankly, Your Excellency, after 4 years of watching you die alive, happiness is worth more than the court's approval." It was on a February afternoon that Felipe finally found the courage. He found Clara in the winter garden, a place that had become theirs, a sanctuary where titles did not matter. He did not kneel. He did not use flowery words. He sat beside her on the marble bench, among roses that were beginning to awaken from winter. "Clara, if I asked you to marry me, the scandal would be national," he said, looking at his own hands. "The court would repudiate me. Other nobles would question my sanity. I could lose political influence. My children would be ridiculed. Doors would close." Clara did not reply. "But if I do not ask you," he turned to face her, "I will lose the only thing that matters, the chance to be happy, the chance to be a man before being a monument. Felipe, marry me." He took her hands. "You will be Duchess of Almarza. Our children will be looked at askance, our doors avoided by half of society, but it will be us. Complete, you and I, and 3 children who need a father and a mother, not statues." Clara felt tears. "What if I do not want to be a duchess? What if I just want to be Clara?" "Then you will be Duchess, Clara, and that will be more than enough." She looked at him for a long time. She saw not the duke, but the man. She saw not the title, but the heart. And she understood. There are choices that define a whole life. This was her moment to choose. "I have conditions," she said. "Anything. Anyone. Never prevent me from teaching. Never. Never use your title to silence me. Never. If I become Duchess, I will use that title to do good, to create a school, to educate the people of these lands. The Duchess will not be an ornament. She will be an agent of change." Felipe smiled, his first true smile in years. "I would not expect less." "Then yes, marry me, Felipe Enrique de Mendoza, and let's scandalize the whole of Spain." Their kiss was witnessed only by roses, but somehow the entire palace seemed to sigh with relief. The news spread like fire in dry straw. "The Duke of Almarza will marry a plebeian governess." The Madrid newspapers exploded in sensational headlines. The court seethed with gossip, and the Mendoza family, the family reacted. Don Rodrigo de Mendoza y Velasco, Count of Trevino, Felipe's cousin and presumptive heir to the duchy, arrived with an entourage of 8 people and a funeral expression. Felipe received him in the throne room, a theater of power used only on occasions of maximum seriousness. He sat in the ancestral ducal chair, the ring on his finger, a posture that admitted no questioning. Clara was present, obliged by protocol to watch in silence. "Cousin," Rodrigo began, his voice controlled but vibrating with anger, "as Mendoza blood I must protest. A governess, the daughter of a disgraced debtor? This stains 400 years of lineage that dates back to the Catholic monarchs." His wife, Eulalia, chimed in, "Think of Queen Isabel II. Think of the court. A plebeian as a duchess? It is an affront to the very idea of nobility." Felipe did not move. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of generations. "As the Ivy Duke of Almarza, Grandee of Spain, I do not answer to counts. I answer only to the crown. and the crown has not opined. Because it is a shame to do so, Rodrigo shot back. If you insist on this madness, I will take the case to the Nobility Council. I will question your mental capacity to govern the duchy. I will say that mourning has driven you mad. He went too far. Felipe stood up slowly. The room seemed to shrink around his presence. Claraara Santandere, he pronounced each word like a sentence, has more nobility in one finger than you in your entire family tree. She speaks 7 languages. She saved a diplomatic negotiation you would not even understand. She is transforming my children from statues into people. And most importantly, she made me remember that a man is more than a coat of arms. Your children will be social bastards. Rodrigo played his last card. Tomas will never be accepted as the V-Duke if you marry her. Then we will break with a rotten society. Felipe walked to the door, opened it. Don Sebastian, escort the Count out and remove the Trevino coat of arms from our alliance records. It was a virtual banishment, a rupture of ties that had existed for centuries. Rodrigo turned pale. You will regret this. The only thing I regret, Felipe said, is taking 35 years to learn that love is worth more than the approval of hypocrites. The next morning, an unannounced carriage passed through the gates. An aristocratic coat of arms, the Dowager Duchess of Osuna, a matriarch whose power in the court rivaled kings. Felipe received her with apprehension. The elderly woman entered the drawing room, leaning on an ebony cane, her sharp eyes assessing everything. A young duke, she said without preamble. I have come to support you. Felipe blinked, surprised. Your Grace. My late husband married for dynastic convenience. She sat down without being invited, a gesture of power. We spent 40 miserable years, he with mistresses, I with resentment. When he died, I felt relief, not tears. Relief. You have found love. That is worth more than the approval of the entire court combined. But society, she banged her cane on the floor, is made up of hypocrites who envy your courage. With my patronage, half will accept. The other half always envied the Mendozas anyway. Clara, who had entered to serve tea, stood motionless. The matriarch stared at her. Come here, girl. Clara approached, terrified. The matriarch held her hands, examining them. Working hands, not aristocratic idleness. These hands have worked, she said. These hands, no real value. You will be a better duchess than half the women who carry the title by birth. And then to Felipe, marry her, quickly, before the vultures organize a formal opposition. And so, with the improbable blessing of one of Spain's most powerful women, the path became a little less impossible. The wedding was set for February. 6 weeks of preparation that turned the palace into a hive of frantic activity. But before the celebrations, there was protocol, notifying Queen Isabel II. The response arrived in an envelope sealed with the royal stamp. Felipe opened it with hands that trembled imperceptibly. His Excellency is within his right to choose a consort. The crown does not interfere in matters of the heart. Diplomatic. Neither approval nor condemnation. But it was enough. The Queen would not block it. Clara sewed her own wedding dress. Not white. That would be excessive pretension. But dark blue velvet, the color of the Mendoza coat of arms, with delicate lace on the cuffs that Amparo helped to embroider. The Duchess of Osuna lent family jewels, a sapphire necklace that had belonged to a queen 3 centuries ago. Felipe ordered a female ducal ring to be created. He did not want to use Leonor's. That would be disrespectful to her memory. The new ring featured the Mendoza coat of arms intertwined with open books. Symbol, knowledge was now part of the lineage. And he did more. He created a ducal office specifically for Clara. Unprecedented. Duchesses did not have offices. They were ornaments, not participants in administration. But Clara would be different. The official title, Duchess Consort of Almarza and Educator of the Ducal Lands. The wedding day dawned with clear skies, a cold February air that made ice crystals sparkle like diamonds in the gardens. The palace chapel had been prepared for 200 people, 60 nobles brave enough to come, 140 commoners. Notably absent, 2/3 of the Castilian nobility, Rodrigo's entire family, representatives of traditionalist ducal houses. Present, the Duchess of Osuna in a place of honor, the Marquise de Salazar, Ambassador Renard, a French diplomatic gesture, and 5 nuns from the convent of Santa Catalina, who had traveled 12 days to see the girl they had educated become a duchess. The bishop priest of Burgos, obtained through the intervention of the Duchess of Osuna, would officiate. His presence was a declaration. The church approved. Clara entered the chapel not on the arm of her dead father, but led by Tomas. The 13-year-old heir, wearing a miniature ducal uniform, was a perfect symbol. The future Vice-Duke accepted the new Duchess. Felipe waited at the altar. There were tears in his eyes, the first public display of emotion in 4 years. The bishop priest read the traditional vows, but Felipe had asked permission to add his own words. I promise to honor her not as duke to duchess, but as man to woman, not as lord to subject, but as equal to equal. I promise that our love will be stronger than scandal, that our union will be more real than any title. Clara replied, I promise to be a duchess worthy of this people, even if I am never accepted by the entire court. I promise to use this title not to elevate myself, but to elevate others. And I promise to remind you always that a true man is measured not by a coat of arms, but by a heart. When the bishop priest said, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Clara signed the ducal register with a hand that did not tremble. The first plebeian duchess in 400 years of Almarza. The chapel bells rang, and for the first time in centuries, it seemed that change was possible. The celebration lasted 3 days, a ducal tradition. But it was not an empty display of pomp. It was a real communion. Nobles who came mingled with the common people. Children from the villages played in the formal gardens. Musicians played not only court minuets, but also an Aragonese jota that made even the Duchess of Osuna clap her hands. On the third night, when the last guests finally withdrew, Felipe and Clara stood alone on the terrace overlooking the ducal lands. 50 kilometers of property that were now her responsibility as well. Are you afraid? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. I was not born for this. No one is born for anything. Felipe hugged her. We become what we choose to be, and you chose to be courageous. Below, in the villages, hearth fires flickered like earthly stars. All those people, all those lives, now connected to the Duchess who spoke 7 languages and sewed her own dress. Clara understood. She had not become Duchess to wear a crown. She had become Duchess to remove the crown from others. March arrived with the promise of spring. Clara, now officially Duchess, had power she had never imagined possible, and she used it. I want to create a school, she announced at the first ducal council that Felipe allowed her to attend. The 6 councillors, elderly men who had managed Mendoza properties for decades, looked at her as if she had proposed abolishing the monarchy. Your Grace, the treasurer, Don Luis, began carefully, schools for the common people are unusual. Then we will be pioneers. Clara did not look away. The cost, I will use my ducal dowry, she cut in. Felipe gave me 100,000 reales. 15,000 will go to the school. Felipe, present but silent due to his promise, watched. There was pride in his eyes. The council reluctantly approved. The ducal school of Almarza was inaugurated in March 1850, an old mill building renovated with 20 wooden desks built by the local carpenter. 20 initial students, boys and girls, mixed, a radicalism that scandalized even progressives. Clara taught personally 3 times a week. She did not delegate. She did not supervise from afar. She was there, hands dirty with chalk, ducal dress stained with ink, explaining geography to barefoot children whose parents had never left the village. The news spread. Duchess teaches peasants. Half of Spain mocked. The other half, secretly, admired. And then the Duchess of Osuna visited the school. She arrived unannounced, in a carriage that stopped outside the old mill. Clara, in the middle of a lesson on ancient Rome, turned pale. The matriarch entered, examining everything, the simple desks, the hand-drawn maps, the frightened children. She sat on a desk. She listened to the entire lesson. When it was over, she stood up and applauded. Extraordinary, she declared. Other noblewomen need to see this. And a movement began. Progressive nobles visited the school, not out of empty charity but out of genuine interest. Some even copied the model. When Queen Isabel II sent a letter, private but intentionally leaked, saying, "Admirable educational initiative," everything changed. If the Queen approved, the court had to accept whether they liked it or not. By October 1850, the school had 80 students and a waiting list of 200. Clara had trained 4 teachers, young people from the common folk, intelligent but without opportunity. She taught them not only subjects, but method, patience, encouragement, the belief that knowledge transforms. One of the students, Luz, a 10-year-old girl with astonishing intelligence, learned to read in 3 months. In 6, she was reading basic French. Clara secured her a scholarship to study in Burgos, the first plebeian girl from the region to receive formal education beyond the basic, and she established the Ducal Education Fund. 10% of all income from the Mendoza lands would go to education, forever, inscribed in ducal law that even future dukes could not easily undo. Felipe watched his wife transform the duchy into a social change laboratory, and he fell more in love every day. But not everything was acceptance. An ultra-conservative priest in a neighboring village began a campaign against the school. Heretical duchess educating women against divine will. One night, an attempted arson, thwarted by watchmen, but frightening. Felipe offered armed protection. Clara refused. Education does not need swords, it needs dialogue. She went to the priest. She spoke with him in Latin, a language he revered. She quoted St. Thomas Aquinas on the value of knowledge. She quoted St. Teresa of Avila on female education. The priest, impressed by her erudition, backed down. He did not support, but he stopped attacking. It was a victory, small but real. November brought a surprise. Don Rodrigo returned. He arrived alone, without his wife Eulalia, who had left him, without an entourage, thin, aged, hunched as if the months had been years. "Cousin," he said to Felipe, his voice broken, "I came to ask for forgiveness." Felipe received him not in the throne room but in the family office, a gesture of equality. Rodrigo confessed, "Eulalia left me. She said I am bitter as vinegar, that the title made me unbearable. She was right." Tears. "I lost my wife. I almost lost you, and for what? Empty pride, fear that your happiness would expose my misery." Felipe understood. His cousin was not a monster. He was just a man trapped in the same armor that had almost destroyed Felipe himself. "Come in as a cousin," he said, "not as a count. Titles do not heal, they only push away." Rodrigo spent 2 months in the palace. He watched Clara work, saw the children flourish, witnessed the transformation of the duchy, and something in him broke, or perhaps finally was mended. He helped Clara create the Statute of the Ducal School, a legal document that protected the institution from future opposition. He donated 50,000 reals to the education fund, and one Sunday morning at Mass, he hugged Felipe publicly, asking for forgiveness in front of everyone. Symbol: society can change. Even men hardened by decades of tradition can learn. 1 year after the wedding, the transformations were undeniable. Tomas, now 14, had been provisionally accepted as the future V-Duke. Some nobles still resisted, but the majority recognized that the boy would be a wise leader. Diego, 11, had an architecture tutor. Felipe had recognized his son's talent, something that would have been impossible before. The boy drew designs for imaginary schools, hospitals, buildings that blended beauty and function. Isabel, 8, sang in a charity concert for the school. The entire court was present, applauding a girl who months ago had not spoken. Felipe was now respected as the reformist duke. Other nobles consulted him about progressive changes, and Clara was called the Duchess of the People, not as an insult but as an honor. Queen Isabel II summoned Clara to the royal palace in Madrid, the first plebeian duchess to be formally received. The meeting was private, just the queen and the duchess. Isabel, a woman of 20 but already aged by the weight of the crown, spoke with thinly veiled envy. "I envy your freedom, Duchess. I was born a princess. I did not choose my husband, my destiny, nothing." Clara boldly replied, "Your Majesty, you can choose to be a just queen. It is a daily choice, not a birthright." Isabel smiled sadly. "Now I understand why he chose you. You have a courage that nobility of blood rarely develops." Spring of 1851 arrived with Clara 6 months pregnant. The news was celebrated in the ducal lands. An additional heir strengthened the lineage, but more than that, it symbolized hope, a child of true love, not dynastic convenience. The school now had 150 students, 6 teachers, 3 buildings. 5 nobles from other regions had created similar schools, citing Almarza as a model. A movement was beginning. Education as aristocratic responsibility, not charity. Felipe learned English. He read Shakespeare, with a terrible accent that made Clara laugh, but he read. Tomas was accepted to the University of Salamanca with honors, the first university-educated Mendoza in generations. The family traditionally learned with private tutors, an aristocratic method that isolated. Rodrigo appeared weekly for dinner, always with a new girlfriend, a teacher, not a noblewoman. Felipe joked that his cousin was recovering lost decades of humanity in months of romantic madness. One evening on the ducal terrace under a starry sky, Clara and Felipe talked about the future. "Are you afraid of childbirth?" he asked, his hand on her belly. "Yes," she admitted. "Your first wife, Leonor, died because I was too proud to call the best doctors," Felipe cut in. "This time 3 doctors from Madrid will come, and if anything at all seems wrong, I will use all the resources of the duchy. I will not repeat the mistake. And if even so," Felipe hugged her, "it will not happen. But if it does, you taught me how to be a father. The children will be fine, and I will survive, because now I know how to live." Clara leaned back on him. Below, the ducal lands stretched under the moonlight. Villages, fields, countless lives, all connected to this woman who had dared to love above her station. "Sometimes I still feel like an imposter wearing a crown," she confessed. "You do not wear a crown." Felipe kissed her hair. "You are the crown. You are everything nobility should be and rarely is. Generous, educated, courageous, humble." June brought labor. The 3 doctors from Madrid occupied an entire suite, transforming it into a makeshift hospital. Felipe did not leave the corridor for 36 hours. Tomás, Diego, and Isabel sat with him, a family united in vigil. When the baby's cry finally echoed, Felipe collapsed in tears. A girl, perfect, healthy. "What shall we name her?" Clara asked, exhausted but radiant. "Leonor, Clara," Felipe said, honoring the past, celebrating the future. And there, in that room where new life had begun, a family reunited, nobility and love intertwined. Something fundamental changed in the Duchy of Almarza. It was no longer a house of ghosts. It was a house of people. September. Little Leonor Clara was 3 months old when the opposition mobilized. The Nobility Council, pressured by an ultra-conservative faction, officially questioned the legitimacy of the marriage. The document arrived in a black envelope sealed with red wax. "It is requested that Don Felipe Enrique de Mendoza y Castilla appear before the council to defend his decision to marry a plebeian, an act that some members consider incompatible with the dignity of a grandee of Spain." It was a direct attack. If the council ruled against Felipe, they could revoke his privileges, politically isolate him, even question Tomás's right to succession. Felipe read the document 3 times. Then he turned to Clara. "I will go. And I will defend not only our marriage but our right to choose love over tradition." "Let me go with you," Clara asked. "They do not allow women in the council. Then I will wait outside. But I will not let you face it alone." Madrid. The council met in a centuries-old palace, a hall lined with portraits of nobles who had died centuries ago. 23 members, all men, all over 50. Felipe entered wearing his full ducal uniform, embroidered coat, medals earned in political campaigns, ceremonial sword, signet ring. The Grand Master of the Council, the Duke of Montemayor, a 70-year-old man who personified tradition, spoke. "Don Felipe, we have been convened due to concern that your marriage to a plebeian stains the noble institution." "Let the accusations come," Felipe said, his voice firm. 3 hours passed. Arguments that Clara lacked lineage, that the children of the marriage would dilute noble blood, that he was setting a dangerous precedent. Finally, Felipe asked for the floor. He stood up. He removed the ducal ring. He placed it on the table in front of everyone. "This ring," he said, "I have carried for 20 years. It was my father's, his father's, 10 generations of them. And do you know what it taught me? That a title is a weight, that noble blood is a prison, that true nobility is not what we inherit, but what we do." Silence. "I married Claraara Santandere," he continued, "because she taught me how to be a man, because she saved my children from becoming statues, because she created a school that educates 150 children. And if you think that stains nobility, then nobility deserves to be stained." He picked up the ring again. He placed it on his finger. "Now decide. Take away my title if you wish. But you will not take away my love. You will not take away the legacy we are building. And you will not take away the right of my son to be a worthy duke, not just the heir of a coat of arms." He turned and left. The vote took 6 hours. Clara waited in the corridor, praying. When the door finally opened, the Grand Master announced, "By 17 votes to 6, the council recognizes the legitimacy of the ducal marriage." And it goes further. It recommends that other noble houses consider worth over lineage. Victory. not unanimous but real. Felipe hugged Clara there, in the council corridor, a greater scandal than any marriage. And for the first time, she used the title, "Thank you, husband. Thank you, Duchess." 10 years later, 1861, the Ducal School of Almarza had transformed into an educational complex. 400 students, 20 teachers, courses ranging from basic literacy to university preparation. Luz, the prodigy girl, had returned with a university degree, the first woman in the province with a higher education. She now directed the school alongside Clara. Tomás, V. Duke of Almarza, at 24 after Felipe ceded the title early to dedicate himself to education, had abolished remnant feudal practices. He always quoted, "My mother taught me that power is not for domination but for elevation." Diego had become a renowned architect, designing schools throughout Spain, beautiful and functional buildings that democratized beauty. Isabel was studying music in Vienna, corresponding weekly with Clara in 4 different languages. And Leonor Clara, now 10 years old, was teaching younger children to read. She had inherited her mother's gift for teaching and her father's stubbornness not to accept injustice. At the school entrance, Felipe had ordered an inscription to be engraved that had become famous. Here, title does not matter. The courage to learn matters. Duchess Clara de Almarza, 1850. One autumn afternoon, Clara and Felipe sat on the same terrace where they had talked so many times. Now with grey hair, hands marked by time but eyes still shining with the light of those who live with purpose. "We did something impossible," Felipe said. "We did something necessary," Clara corrected. 50 schools across Spain now follow our model," he continued. 4,000 children educated, 3 generations of teachers trained. We changed the country. "No," Clara held his hand. "We only started. Others will continue." Felipe raised his wine glass. "A toast, then, to the woman who spoke 7 languages and taught me the only language that matters, the language of love. And to the man," Clara toasted, "who exchanged a crown of power for a crown of humanity. Below, in the lands that now prospered, not by ducal imposition but by collaboration, lights were turning on, families dining, children studying by lamplight, teachers preparing lessons, life, abundant and free, flourishing like roses in a garden finally cared for. And in the palace that was no longer a fortress but a home, a family, made not of blue blood but of courageous choices, celebrated not a title but love. The Ducal School of Almarza operated for 60 years, educating 4,000 students before being incorporated into the Spanish public education system in 1910. Clara de Mendoza, née Santander, died in 1889 at the age of 66. Her funeral was attended by over 3,000 people. 3 of her students became university professors, an unthinkable feat before her. Felipe de Mendoza died in 1891, 2 years after his wife. His epitaph, chosen by himself, read, "Here lies a man who learned humility from a wise woman." Tomás, the V-Duke, quoted in his inauguration speech, "My mother was not born noble. She became noble. And thus she taught me that true nobility is earned by actions, not inherited with a surname." The Palace of Almarza still exists, converted into an educational museum. At the entrance, the original inscription remains, read by thousands of annual visitors. Here title does not matter. The courage to learn matters. And so a governess who spoke 7 languages transformed a duchy, a family, and in the end, a part of a country. Not with swords or proclamations, but with books, patience, and the unwavering belief that knowledge is the only title no one can take away. Her story still echoes, whispered in schools, remembered in universities, taught as an example that love and courage can indeed change the world. One word at a time, one child at a time, one heart at a time.